I started Creo Legal in 2017, and we're a boutique commercial law practice. We provide commercial and corporate legal services. We do some litigation and dispute resolution as well. Most of our clients are in the technology and health industries. We've been slowly focusing down on those industries over time, but we are a full service commercial law practice. I think that the story really starts from when before I set up the practice. The reason why I went out on my own was I just wasn't really happy with how firms were run traditionally. Most firms are still run that way. They focus on volume. They try and use the lower skilled workers to perform the highest value jobs. It creates this unhealthy obsession with recording time and charging based on time. And that was just a real drag, to be honest. That's something you don't learn in law school. And that's just what day-to-day life as a lawyer is going to be like. And they never tell you you're going to spend at least an hour a day just meticulously writing down what you've just done. That's something that I really didn't enjoy. So when I set up my practice, I made a commitment to myself to essentially drop time recording, just charge fixed fees. It makes my life better. And I think it really makes my clients' lives better as well. But what that does is when you're charging fixed fees, you've got to be efficient. And so rather than spending all my time recording on a timesheet, I focused a lot on how can I do my work efficiently and what can I do to make the client experience and the client outcome as good as it can be while delivering the outcome as quickly as possible. Even in the early days of my firm, this is before AI, of course, I was focusing a lot on, okay, how can I use technology? How can I onboard clients smoothly? How can I communicate with clients well? How can I deliver the service in a way that is easy to consume? They get the answers that they want quickly and without hassle. And so then in comes AI. I quickly realized that this was a technology that could really hit on all of those points that I had grown to value and focus on in my day-to-day practice. It's something that could both allow me to complete my work more quickly, but also improve the accuracy and the overall quality of the work at the same time. And previously, you had to sacrifice one for the other, essentially. If you wanted to do something quickly, you weren't really going to do as good a job as if you spent twice as long. But that's really not the case anymore. And that's just allowed me to rethink how I work as a lawyer, but also how our firm works. And we're a boutique practice, so we've only got a team of 5. So how we use technology and how we use systems and how we work together is really important. And I spend a lot of my time thinking about that and optimizing that. You know, with that limitation that we have in our team on the number of hours that we have, there really were, thinking back on it in hindsight and how we used to do things before using AI, that ceiling quite easily. So as an example, if we had multiple leads come in or multiple jobs land at the same time, and the clients don't see this, but we'd have to prioritize, okay, which one are we going to do first? And if there were 5 jobs that happened to land, of course, you can't control when jobs come in, right? I think every practice principal wish they could do that, but you can't control that. So if 5 jobs happen to land on the same day, you have to prioritize which clients matters you're going to look at first. And the client that comes 5th in that rank order, their work may get pushed back by 2 days just because of how much capacity you have. You don't have that much flexibility, right? You can't do 10 4-hour jobs in a day. It's just not possible, especially for a single lawyer, right? If you're thinking about it from that perspective. So the costs that we didn't know that we were incurring, or just the situation we were in, thinking back on it now, we have that much more flexibility now because of our ability to essentially turn up our productivity as we need it. Our firm now at 60 or 70% capacity, it looks a lot like what we used to do when we were at full capacity. And we can quite comfortably coast at that level, but we can turn it up and do a lot more if we want to. And I'm sure my team would agree with me. Being able to just coast at 70 or 80% capacity at a comfortable level, and yet our billings, they're equivalent to what they were when we were tearing our hair out and not sleeping and staying back late. I think just the work-life balance is a lot better, but just the work itself, it's a lot easier to do. It's a lot less stressful. I think that translates to better client outcomes. And like I said, a lot of it is hidden to the clients. The client that is ranked fifth in terms of the priority of what we look at first, they don't know that. But now they may be fifth, but they still get their turnaround within maybe the same day, as opposed to 3 days later, which was the case before. Most of our work comes from referral. And as a principal, I've always thought about how does that impact the growth of the firm? There's a snowball effect, right? So if you can complete 10 jobs really well for 10 clients, let's say, in a week, those clients will, over the next 6 or 12 months, or maybe shorter timeframes even, refer friends or other people that they know. But if you could complete 20 jobs in that same week, those 20 clients would refer again their friends within that same time period. And so there's this stacking effect. It's really exponential in a way, right? So the more work that you can get through, because you're a lot more productive, and the better the outcomes are for those clients, because you're being able to turn around their work efficiently and given them a good outcome. That's allowed our business to grow. And last financial year, our firm's billings increased by 35% over the year before, and we had one less team member. And I think a large part of that is because of our use of AI. So 2 years ago, I was basically always passively hiring because I could always see that if we had too many leads come in, we would have to turn people away because we're just at or near capacity. I was always looking for people. But now I'm no longer looking for anyone because we're doing enough work. We're a boutique practice. We don't have any support staff. We don't have any juniors. All of our lawyers are seniors. So we're not a volume focused practice. We want to do high quality, larger jobs. Ideally, we want to enjoy our work as well, right? So we want to practice in areas that we want to practice in, and we don't necessarily want to just accept every job that comes through the door just because we can do it. And the use of AI has allowed us to achieve that. Since I started the practice, we've been on a slow path to specialization. A lot of our clients are in technology and health, and we're now really doubling down on those areas and focusing more on those areas because we're getting more referrals. We're doing better work in those areas, and we can flesh out our offering as a specialist practice in those areas. For example, in health, we have a lot of clients that are doctors and dentists, practice owners primarily. We're now expanding to areas within health that, or perhaps adjacent to health, like giving advice to medical device manufacturers around the Therapeutic Goods Association rules, and just really fleshing out that specialist knowledge within the broader health ecosystem. And for a boutique practice like mine, that's really how you can compete with even the very large firms, is being able to do that really high quality work in those niche areas. And like I said, we're not about volume, and we really want to seek out those really high value jobs, but the interesting ones. And before AI, that path to specialization was slow because there was always that pressure around, okay, we don't do a lot of property work, but we do some. And if a property job came in, there was always that pressure of, we should probably take this, even though it's going to take us away from doing the work that we really want to be doing, because we need to hit our billables. But with that increased productivity, increased capacity and flexibility, we're now being able to make that decision, okay, should we just refer that on to another firm and then focus more on the work that we want to be doing? We do some dispute resolution and litigation work, and most of that work is time charged. I don't do that work personally. My associate director, Sandy, does that. He's now been able to fix fee components of his work, which previously he wouldn't do. When you fix fee something, you need to have a fair amount of certainty about the work that would need to be involved. And that means understanding the situation, and ideally you've done the work before so you know what to do. But you can deal with the use of AI, you can deal with a bit more uncertainty, because you know that if there is, let's say, 30 or 40% more work, that actually doesn't necessarily translate to 30 or 40% more time in that particular matter, because of the ability to just be really efficient with what you're doing. Sandy is now fixed feeing different components of the process of dispute resolution and court litigation that previously we would never have really considered that, just because of the risk of offering a fixed fee and spending way too much time such that it's essentially like a losing job, right? Yeah, that's been really positive for his work. And I think his clients really respond to that because a lot of firms, again, they don't fix fee litigation work because of that uncertainty. So the fact that the initial advice or certain components, drafting pleadings, can now be fixed fee, where clients who've had disputes before, they would never have seen that 2 years ago, or even they still don't see that with a lot of firms. So I think that's really been able to help his practice, and his billings have gone up significantly. Having happy clients who are in disputes and they're inherently unhappy with what's happening, giving them good outcomes is a really big deal, because you're turning a bad outcome into a good one. Yeah, and our clients are business owners. So they need cost certainty. They're looking for a commercial outcome, and they need certainty about how much it's going to cost them to get that outcome. And even the context of a dispute, saying to them that it could cost between $10,000 and $200,000 just gives people nightmares, right? So the ability to give that certainty, especially in an extremely uncertain context, is really valuable. And with our commercial and corporate work, there are some certain components, that certain tasks that we previously would time charge for, maybe extensive negotiations on a contract when you're dealing with a party that, may not be that reasonable. Even in those situations now, we're being able to cap our fee, because we just know that even if there's a decent amount of work involved in this negotiation, we're going to be able to churn through it fairly quickly. If another party comes back with twice as many changes to a contract that, a normal party, a reasonable party might come back with, it's not necessarily taking us twice as long to get through that, because we can use AI to assess those changes, reference them back to the contract, reference it back to the advice that we've given to our client, and being able to distill all of that very quickly and to come up with the right answer, even though it's on the face of it being a job that's twice the size, and it's just no longer the case anymore. So even in a commercial context, there's now very few areas that we do time charge, because we know we can fulfill the need of the client within a fixed fee. Yeah, I would count myself as an early adopter amongst my colleagues in the legal industry. I still didn't realize just how powerful it would be. And the thing is, over time, not only do I get better at using the tool, and my whole team gets better at using it, but the system itself gets better almost week to week, right? In the beginning, I could theorize that, yes, it's going to be able to look through this contract for me, how insightful it could be, and how quickly it could review a contract. I think the best example is now that in terms of how my workflow has changed, even so, if I'm having an initial meeting with a client, they may send some documentation through that I would previously might have just skimmed over and maybe just come up with a few important questions that would ask the client before the initial meeting. But now with AI, let's say it's a contract or maybe some emails between them and another party. Now with AI, I can essentially review that before even having the initial meeting, and come into the meeting knowing exactly what the document says, what are the problems, and have a draft action plan for the client even before I speak to them. Now, you'd never do that. I would never have done that before, because in an initial meeting, you don't know whether the client's even going to engage you. So really, you're trying to minimize the time that you need to spend in order to have a good meeting. You've obviously got to do some preparation, but you want to minimize the time that you'd spend so you could have a productive meeting, and then hopefully during the meeting come up with a plan that seems acceptable to the client, and then you can get engaged. Now I can come fully prepared as if I've already done the work, which not only allows me to really talk to the core issues and apply them to the client's situation within the meeting. I'm delivering a lot of value just in that initial meeting, which translates to far more engagements. So then even the number of meetings that I'm having relative to the number of engagements, now we're converting a lot of those leads into clients, because it's as if I'd spent 3 hours looking over their material and thinking about their problem when I might have only spent 15 minutes. And it's something that you can really do in the 10 or 15 minutes before a call, is use this tool to give you the really important points that you need to address in that meeting with that client. And yeah, I didn't think in the beginning that's something that I could do, right? In the beginning, it's more about, okay, now that I've got a client that's engaged me, I need to review this contract. Okay, maybe this contract might take me 3 hours to review normally, manually. And maybe I thought, okay, in the best case scenario, it's cutting that in half. A lot of the time, it's cutting that time down even by more than that. But I didn't think about the entire process of dealing with the client, how it's transformed, even the upfront process of building the rapport, building authority on the subject matter. And it really is a sales process as well in providing a quote and explaining to the client how we can help them and deliver that value. And it's very obvious to them, even in the initial meeting, that we can deliver that value just because I come equipped with all of the tools that I need to communicate those points. It relates to the previous point, and that is it's not just about being able to do what we do faster, let's say. It also changes actually what we can do. So if we now think about after a client has engaged us. So every job, especially let's say commercial transaction, there are these basic things, and a lot of them are procedural, maybe box ticking in nature, basic things that you need to get done for a transaction to be completed. Now, previously, outcome, and if most of that fee was previously taken up in just delivering those basics, then what the client is getting is just the basic service, right? They're getting, in essence, the minimum service that they need to get that outcome. Now with AI, delivering those basics now takes us a lot less time. So the human time is now spent thinking around the problems and making sure that there are no unaddressed issues, there's nothing that's missed. We're accounting for things that clients themselves are not even thinking of. And particularly because we fix fee, we now have that broad scope to be able to deliver it in that way. The assumption was that we could just do the same job faster, but it's much more than that. It's about now we can compare if it's an existing client, let's say. Now, instead of reviewing a contract and saying, this is what the contract says, and we've delivered it to you very quickly, and yes, the client may be very happy, we can now use AI and say, this is what the contract says, and these are the differences to the last 5 contracts that we did for you. Now, most lawyers would agree with me. They would never look at an old file and spend time reviewing an old contract because that's not what we're charging for. But because of the power of AI, we can now not only review, let's say, the current contract that we're dealing with for a client, but we're comparing it against the 5 previous contracts and creating a summary of the key changes, because a client, business owner, it's relevant to them what they've done in the past. So being able to just deliver that extra advice that you would never have done before, that really broke my assumptions about what AI could help us do. And then you apply that across all clients and then across a team. And with how our team works together, we're now delivering a service that is not just faster, but it's just far higher quality in so many dimensions compared to what we were doing before. It really helps in tackling those new jobs and expanding into new areas. Now, obviously, we're not going to start taking on family law matters because we're a commercial practice, but within health, I mentioned now we're doing work, very specialized work relating to the TGA and even disciplinary work for practitioners that might get in trouble with their regulator. And that's adjacent to the work that we have historically done. It might have previously taken years to get that experience, the knowledge, and the skills to be able to deliver a new type of service. But now we can within minutes know what legislation applies to this new area, what relevant case law there is, and even the system can generate a framework within which we can provide that service and deliver that advice. So the time now to deliver a new service is now more about focusing on the execution and the implementation, as opposed to, okay, what do we actually do in this situation? We already know now with AI what we're supposed to do and where we should look for answers. And quite commonly, the system already gives us those answers with our initial queries. So we're now adding capability to our firm quite quickly, and just tying it back to what I was saying earlier, because we're now really going really deep with our specialization in health and technology. That's just made that process a lot faster. I've been practicing for 14 years now, or is it 15? I'm starting to lose count. I would have probably told you 5 years ago that I'm not really going to learn much that's new, or maybe the odd, very unusual edge case might be something new. But now, because we're expanding into new areas, I'm personally a lot more excited about the work that I'm doing because I'm able to investigate and learn about these new areas and deliver new services to existing clients and new ones. I find that very exciting. That's probably why I've done a lot of work in the tech space. I love that ever-changing nature of technology. And now that's the technology has allowed me to apply that to my professional work in the law, and where I can go into these new areas and feel confident that I can do that. When I started practice, I would take on every job and that I could, but within my area of true expertise, and then quickly refer on. Now I'm able to specialize, take on work that I enjoy doing, higher value work, not focusing on volume, and then also expand to new services that are more interesting to me. So it's really reinvigorated my enjoyment for my work, and I'm sure my team agrees with me as well. And they were quite happy that we were privileged to get really early access to AI legal assistant, and even just since that time, how much the system has improved, and combined with how much we've gotten better at using it, it's really changed the game for us. Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. Lawyers, I think, are coming around, but I think AI technology is going to be as transformative as the internet was for business, but also for legal practice. And I think we talked about the snowball effect that adopting this technology has on day-to-day practice. It puts you on this trajectory that if, as a firm, if you adopt technology, AI technology 2 years later than your competitor, and your trajectory starts 2 years later, you're just not going to catch up. That's what I firmly believe. So I think 2 years ago, it was the case that, all right, take your time, learn about it, get comfortable. But where we are now, I think it's really starting to become urgent in my view. If I try and think about where our firm would be if we had never adopted AI tech into our practice, it would look very different. And like I said, we're on this trajectory now that I think is a large part of it is because of our use of the tech. And anyone who's thinking about using AI technology, I think they should just give it a go. And if they give it a go and they don't like it, which I think is very unlikely, then so be it. But if you don't give it a go and really see how it can help you, and not only help your professional life, but just make you a happier human in general, then you're really missing out. Yeah, it is. There is a learning curve. So, for example, we've had a new team member join recently, and she had never used the AI legal assistant before, of course. And it was actually quite a quick process now that I'm experienced with the system in training her and how to use it. And I think it probably seems harder to a lot of people than it really is, in the same way that maybe using a fully digital word processor might have seemed harder than using a typewriter, but who's going to go back to that now? So training is important. You've really got to make a commitment to using it, but the more you use it, the more you'll want to use it, such that my team, they're saying to me, like, how do we do this before we had these tools? My career started when the internet was already around, when computers were already around. But I've spoken to older practitioners who started practicing before computers and before the internet, and they have a similar view of it. They were saying, like, how did we ever do this? Okay, we had 30 typists in the firm. That's how we did it. But that just seems crazy now to even have to have that. So I think on the other side of using AI and adopting it and realizing it, that's actually a fundamental part of your practice, then yeah, I think you would have a similar view of a before and after picture. I think we're in for some fairly substantial changes. And these are changes that were probably always going to happen, but now that's all been brought forward quite substantially. So the industry, I believe, over the last 10 or 20 years has been moving towards a situation where you would have a few really large firms with hundreds of lawyers, and then a tremendous amount of really small firms like mine, even solo practitioners. And the mid-sized firms were either going to grow a lot bigger or break up into smaller ones. ones. And I think maybe that might have been another sort of 2 or 3 decade long process, but I think AI has really fast tracked that because now a solo practitioner can do a lot more work, high quality work, and can compete with firms with 5 or 10 lawyers. And firms like mine with 5 lawyers can now compete with the mid-sized firms to either become the really big firms or to break up into the smaller firms is really been turned up. And I think that's where we're going to land. When I started my practice in 2017, it was already quite easy to set up a practice with practice management software. Being able to go out on my own was quite easy. I think it's a lot easier now and essentially a no-brainer for any, I think, who has significant experience in the area that they practice. And that's just over the next 5 years and 10 years, just going to translate in a lot of lawyers leaving those mid-sized firms, starting up their own practices and doing what I've done, found areas that they like working in, focusing on that and doing really good work and just enjoying being a lawyer.